with us such an important and close partner such as the high-level climate champions team. Just to let you know that during this session we will have a cartoonist listening online, so at the end of the session we will see his art. My name is Paz Gonzalez. I'm part of Fundación Avina, and I'm managing partner of the Resilience Hub representing Latin America and Caribbean. So I would like to say just a few words and to remind us all that we stand at the time of deeply uncertainty in a world that is changing rapidly in front of our eyes. But yet, I think it's an important moment for take this opportunity. And never before it has been so important, so urgent, and so possible to make big transformations and to change our aspiration into concrete actions. Today, as we gather with representatives from governments, NGOs, local voices, and businesses, we are building a bridge of collaboration. And resilience and energy transition are not merely goals. They reflect a collective commitment that no single person can achieve alone. We are in the era of implementation, and the road to COP30 presents an opportunity to increase the voices of those working to secure resilience and making real changes in their communities and in their countries. So let this event be a reminder that despite uncertainty, our strength lies in collaboration. So thank you very much to all the panelists that are joining us today. I will give the floor to Luciano from the high-level climate champions team to present the activities that we are having today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being with us here today. It's a pleasure to have you to discuss the nexus between energy mitigation, adaptation, nature, growth, development, and how there is no divide between the narratives of mitigation and adaptation for the energy sector, but also how these two can provide synergies to boost development, keeping people and nature at the heart of the energy transitions. So we have quite an exciting agenda for today. We are starting our conversation with, just 1 second please, that I'm switching. Thank you. We are starting our conversation having Her Excellency Razana Al-Mubarak giving us some scene-setting remarks, UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP28, who has led a lot of the discussion during the last few years on both of these topics, and particularly about nature. Then we will have a series of speakers from different perspectives, bringing together government, civil society organizations, international governmental organizations, and others, non-party stakeholders. For this, we will have a panel to discuss and bring different views about the synergies between resilience, mitigation, and nature, particularly involving the energy sector. So welcome. Thank you for being here. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I've been asked by the team to inaugurate the silent disco. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you're actually listening because it was very difficult for me to hear, but this is a very cool gadget. Unfortunately, there is no silent disco, but we might want to throw one at some point. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining this important dialogue about the not just transitioning away from fossil fuels, but really our approach, because the approach becomes just as nascent and important as the goal. And we really need to ensure that this approach not only achieves the targets, but also ensures that it builds resilience. Over the past 2 years as high-level champion, I've had the privilege to meet leaders from across sectors, whether it was NGOs, mayors, youth, indigenous peoples, or also academia. The drumbeat has been very steady. It's been consistent. It, of course, is looking at some political direction, but I think the train, when it comes to action in the real economy, has indeed moved. And there's nowhere that I've really witnessed it more than in Latin America, where I had the privilege to be present, represent the high-level champions and the climate change agenda at COP16 in Cali, Colombia. And from when I asked why is it so active in Latin America, the response has been historical, that Latin America has historical leadership on climate and nature. Of course, hosting the Earth Summit in 1992, but of course, COP15 in Cancun, and the first ever action agenda under the UNFCCC launched in Lima, which paved the way for the creation of the role of the high-level champion, which, of course, I'm privileged to play today with my co-champion, Nigar, from COP29. So where are we today? At COP28 in Dubai, we placed nature and energy at the heart of the global stocktake as part of the UAE consensus. Our time in Baku offers an opportunity to further strengthen the connection between climate and nature. In Latin America and the Caribbean, the urgent need for resilient infrastructure to support development, increase energy access, and reduce inequalities is clear. And due to recent extreme weather events in the region, it reminds us collectively the urgency of our call to action. Nature, ladies and gentlemen, can play a key catalytic role in unlocking these opportunities by delivering on both climate resilience and mitigation goals. But we need targeted investment in nature-based solutions. These solutions can mitigate flooding, support resilient food systems, and ensure our energy transition respects and protects critical ecosystems, which are often our first line of defense. So we really need a holistic approach to energy and nature to deliver on the UAE consensus, on the 2030 climate solution, but also on the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda. And as high-level champion with the community that are also here, we've been advocating for the need for radical collaboration between public and private sectors. And the demand in the market is growing. At COP28 last year, over 150 businesses and financial institutions supported our Nature Positive for Climate Action. This initiative has now grown to over 500 entities, with concrete progress through initiatives like the adoption of the TNFD's disclosures, as well as setting nature-based science targets alongside climate targets as well, and ensuring that they integrate policies to end deforestation. During the New York Climate Week, we also presented Scaling Nature Finance Now, highlighting investment opportunities in nature-based solutions, especially in Brazil. Dear friends, I just wanted to conclude with really 3 messages. As we look at energy transition, it is important that we pay attention to the resilience of the system itself. As we know, the goals of doubling down on energy efficiency and tripling renewable energy will require investment in the resilience of the system. And we need to be bold, and we need to recognize that we cannot have an energy transition that is built at the expense of nature. So really important from the onset that we include nature consideration in our planning approaches. Finally, who are we doing all this for? It is really important that our energy transition is driven by the needs of people and people on the ground. And with that, sure, technological innovation is extremely important, but we need to also, alongside that, ensure that these are technologies that can be led by local economies and built by local economies, and ensure that this works really to benefit both people, planet, as well as climate. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to our dialogue this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. For the next section, I will give the floor to Claire Skaya. Claire is the Global Managing Director of Climate in the Nature Conservancy, and Claire will introduce our speakers and host this fireside chat on energy systems resilience and adaptation strategies for Latin America and the Caribbean. Claire, are you sitting?
Thank you. Dealing with too many different devices or things going on in my hand at the moment. Thank you very much. So can I invite to the panel Alice Amorim, if she's here, wonderful, who's the COP30 Advisory Unit from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in Brazil, and also Maria Neto, who is the Executive Director of Instituto Clima Sociedad, and then Hannah Sacramento Baliero, I should have checked how to pronounce your name, who's the Executive Director of the Makinguere Institute, and finally Simon Benmarazi, the Team Lead for Technology and Infrastructure at IRENA. So thank you all for joining me, and after those amazing opening remarks, I think the focus of this panel is clear. We're focusing on those synergies. How do we bring together the opportunity to adapt whilst we mitigate, and how we can use nature as part of the solution? And I come from TNC, so I have to say that TNC is a large part of the solution. A third of the mitigation, cost-effective mitigation needs can be delivered by nature. But also when you look at the first things that people want to do for adaptation, it is almost always increase the resilience of their ecosystem. It's like 80% of the first low-cost options to take. So we know that the synergies exist. We know that we need to look at the resilience of our low carbon infrastructure, and we need to make sure that it's robust to a range of climate futures. And we know that we need radical collaboration to deliver this. So this is our task, to pull out how we do this in this discussion. And I think there are some really good examples of how this is beginning to emerge. And I've got colleagues in the audience here who have been supporting the placement of renewables so that they're placed in places that are going to do least harm to nature, give most opportunity of jobs to communities, and create a really resilient infrastructure energy system for the future through acceleration zones in Europe, or how you can bring those into auctions, for example, how you bring that into your procurement of energy. So there are all sorts of examples happening around the world. I think also with this focus on Latin America, our water funds work in Latin America has been really instrumental to water funds now being set up in Africa. And building that collaboration across a whole range of partners to improve the resilience of the watershed and improve the water security of a location has been incredibly influential. Another example from Latin America would be Quintana Roo, which was the first place to do a coral reef insurance scheme, and that's protecting the coral reefs, but it's also protecting the settlements along the coast from storm surges, from high winds. So I think we've got, across Latin America, some incredible examples. So maybe I'll start with Alice. How would you see a more integrated approach to the adaptation agenda being promoted within Latin America region?
Thank you so much. I'm gonna take it out. It's a bit weird. Sorry, it's a little weird. So, no, thank you so much for the invitation to come here and to actually have this very important discussion. I come with representing the COP30 units and the space in which the Ministry of Environment, where we are starting to think about the agenda of COP30 and how we're going to unfold this, not only from a negotiations perspective, but from a climate action action agenda perspective. And one of the key elements of our vision to do so is to actually start showing more clearly and how the blurring the lines between mitigation and adaptation overall, not only on energy, but in different sectors, especially in infrastructure, trying to understand what that means and how we can showcase more, not only Latin America, but actually the global South solutions, such as the ones that you have just described, in a way that we see this agenda being framed not in the logic of the negotiations dynamics of just simply attracting more financial resources, but actually showing those solutions on the ground in a way that actually you can frame it in a much more positive way. So one of the interesting, I would say, examples or situations to have a COP in Brazil and to do that is precisely the fact that infrastructure in the Amazon, for instance, in particular the hydropower plants in the Amazon, are actually increasingly becoming more vulnerable to different impacts. And these are basically the main basis of the mitigation, the historical mitigation strategy on low carbon energy matrix of Brazil. So it's an interesting context to think of how can we use this actual experience of the country to bring these debates in a much more practical way and not so abstract. So this is one very, I think, specific example, but there are others. I think it would be interesting to tap into the region and see where there are other parallels to explore. If we think about the northeastern region of Brazil and how the water scarcity and expansion of renewables is happening, the way the whole basis for tripling renewables in the country will be based exactly in that region. So at the same time is precisely the same place where most of the poorest communities are based. So if we don't bring this synergy to the heart of this process, we are going to fail tremendously. So I think there are some life stories coming from Brazil that can illustrate exactly how it works. And we need to make sure that we build those bridges between Brazil and Latin America to make the COP30 a global South and a Latin American COP, and not a Brazilian COP only.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think demonstration is a really important way of inspiring people to do things in a different way. And I guess to do that, we also need to find those examples that a whole range of different actors will understand and will mobilize around. So maybe if I can go to Maria now on this, how do we build that relationship between businesses, governments and other non-state actors in the Latin American region behind this mission, this integration synergy mission?
Couple of things. First of all, I think when we look at the cost of the impacts of climate change in the region, okay, these costs impact not only, let's say, governments, because we're having big economic losses actually annually. They impact the way the development of the countries happen, but they also impact locally the people, right? So that's the first thing we need to look at is historically the region has been increasingly being more vulnerable to climate change. The economic costs of the lack, for example, of having insurance or ways to cover most of these losses, and the lack of planning as well, has resulted in more and more costs that are social and economic for the region. So this is the first thing I would like to put as a layer, because that is what brings the need for, at one hand, adapting to this inaction situation we have historically, and considering that our mitigation plans as well cannot be done without considering these costs and these impacts and the fact that we are getting this higher frequency and intensity of cases. To give very concrete positions of things that are actually even worrisome for the region. Brazil is a country that has 85% of its energy renewable, right? And this 85% of renewable energy is today threatened to the situation of dry seasons that put our hydropower in very delicate situations in seasons like we had this year of very, very high dry seasons. And then a major discussion on backfiring even of some governmental entities saying for energy security reasons, we may need to start plugging in again thermal power or gas. So there could be, a backwards situation if we don't prepare to adapt our energy system and our infrastructure to think about how we are going to push and increase the renewables, considering the vulnerability we have in relation to that. And actually most of Latin America is very much reliant on nature-based solutions. And therefore, I would say many other countries, Colombia for sure is a similar situation, will have this kind of vulnerability. So it's important that we just don't look at as two strategies as delinked, okay? But also thinking about communities and locally. To give an example, you're talking about the ecosystems and nature-based. We were this morning discussing in another panel about how we look at technology and so on, and somebody was talking about cities in the Amazon, and I was actually in a panel in Cali discussing about nature-based solutions and infrastructure, precisely. And for me, one of the big things we have to start thinking in Brazil, and was a very important, let's say, turning point in discussions, was inundations we had in the south of Brazil this year, where clearly, we tend to plan cities just thinking about the boundaries of cities. But we don't think about cities being part of a much broader ecosystem. So, for example, when you talk about cities in the Amazon, they are not isolated. They are part of a much broader ecological, this is just like that. I hope you guys can hear me. It's really weird. So it's a much broader discussion. So I don't know, whatever, it's not working. Hello? Is working now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just to say again, this requires us to think in a different way.
Yeah.
Because even in the south of Brazil, that's very urbanized, a lot of the impacts of inundation were also due to zones that were degraded. And cities that had actually forests around them were much more resilient than cities that were in dry areas. Yeah. And if you look at the Amazon, the vulnerability of the cities in the Amazon, and you have to see the cities in the Amazon is almost a sea with cities like in the ocean of forests. The impact we are having on the foresting has a huge impact in the cities. But the thing is, we can't anymore just plan infrastructure in the cities, not thinking about the relation of the cities with the broader ecosystem. So I think also when we talk about vulnerability and nature-based solutions and adaptation, it requires us to start really thinking better how the planning of infrastructure is not only about, my city and I have trees and the city has better temperature, that's true, but it's much broader than that. The city's planning needs to think about how this is interrelated to the whole ecosystem, because I may plan very well my city, but if there are major fires around it, or if there is major deforestation, the actual temperature of the city is going to increase, or there might be other impacts of lack of water and so on. So I think this is the provocation we have for Latin America, again, coming to our relationship to infrastructure, because let's say our region, and I think many of the South, the global South countries, has a lot of this reliance and still relationship of the nature around the cities and how we are planning and relating to our ecosystems. And I think that's an area also we need to think. How we bring public, private, and civil society on that. I think there is no way to delink that, because you need a government to have a completely different way to plan and improve the way governments are acting. The economic costs of not acting affect the whole economy. Our ecosystem, our economies are completely reliant on nature-based ecosystems. So if these ecosystems start failing, our economies are going to fail. So how we bring also private sector is by them understanding that we will have less losses, that part of our planning for improving and development may get these gains. But we also need the local society, because from the very broader plan, like our renewables, to the very local level, we need to consider this exchange. So I think there is a lot of opportunities to bring these partners together and start thinking together how we develop new planning and new ways to resolve these issues. The key issue is to start understanding the fact that these are actual costs that can be resolved, but if we very quickly start together, planning for resiliency and understanding that any development pattern we take, including mitigation of climate change, will need to be adapted to the actual increasing frequency and intensity of the climate impacts. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really clear. I think that idea of sort of really thinking about cities and the hinterland, thinking about that geospatial planning, bringing the different actors together around those strategies, it feels exactly right. And I guess the issue is that governments are so used to planning in their sectors and their sector silos, it's really hard to shift to that more spatial planning approach. And it's going to take real effort by all of us to get there. And I suppose also, so often in these processes, communities are seeing things in an entirely different way from everyone else. And Hannah, if we look at the perspective from communities, what does it mean to build resilience in their communities? And how can the partnerships that we bring and try and get the sectors out of their sectors and into spaces and thinking about the geospatial planning processes, what can communities do to sort of engage in that and influence that process?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. I think it's a really important conversation to build. And I want to introduce myself because I come from Brazil and I also come from Belém, the city who is receiving the next COP. And I'm here to share with you a bit of our examples of how we are acting on the ground with different communities that we have in Brazil, but particularly on the Amazon region. On Mapinguari Institute, the organization that I run with a bit of other members, we are looking to the agri-food systems, but also to the transition of the agri-food systems to a more resilient, climate resilient systems, but not just in the climate area, but looking to the social area also. So we are in this moment with the local government trying to push, but also trying to advise our local government at the state level to implement a public policy that supports more of our agriculture, but our family agricultures, not just the big and monoculture agriculture. And because we know and that we believe that they are the ones that really put the food on the Brazilian table. That's how we call it in Brazil. So we are looking to the public policies, but are we also doing the research that are necessary to look at these public policies and have them implemented to the people on the ground. Another example that I can share with you is the campaign that we are running in Brazil right now as COP30 committee. We are a coalition of organizations from all the Brazil, from the civil society, and we are presenting documents that here I want to share with Alice representing the government. Because in this document there are almost 40 proposals of what we want to see on Brazilians NDC, because we're having now our next round of NDCs, and we know that everyone around the world has big expectations about how Brazil is going to present its NDCs, and we have this perspective of how in Brazil we want to see an NDC working. And this document represents many of the work of what people do on the ground with different communities around Brazil. The work that we do in the state of Amapá, that is a neighbor of the state of Pará, is shown in one of the proposals in food systems chapter, one of the subjects that is in this document, and is related to how public policies in the federal area are working and what we need to see to have a more ambitious NDC in Brazil. And like this, we can push other countries to look at Brazil's NDC so they can be more ambitious also. But we are talking about an ambition with the mitigation and adaptation together. This is what ambitions is for us right now, because we are not in a moment that we can look just for mitigation and forget about adaptation, as the many examples that we were related here in this panel today. And another example that I want to share with you, talking about cities, talking about how we want that the next COP is not just a forest COP, as many people want the Amazonia to be the forest COP, because we want to have a people's COP, a people-centered COP, and this means social justice also. Many of the governments are talking about the forest COP, but we need and we have to say that in this forest that exists in the Amazon region, we are living. People are living to have the forest, and also most of the people in the Amazon region is living in cities with city problems. And when the infrastructure comes to the cities, there is an example of the floodplains in a bit of the rural communities, but also in the urban communities, that people in community makes of these fields that receives the water of the rain, and makes of them like a soccer field. So when it's summer, everybody can play soccer, and when it's raining, that's the area that absorbs the water from the rain. So this is nature-based solution made by the community. And I believe that an interaction that we need to do and to have here in this panel about how we can work together is that I see many of the climate ecosystem looking for the ground as if people on the ground needs to learn from the multilateral high-level system how to talk the expertise and the hard words that we need to pronunciate in these spaces, but also I believe that people at these high-level spaces in the climate agenda need to go to the ground and also learn with people on the ground how people are already doing it, already adapting their communities, their areas, because it's over there that is the real adaptation that is being done, not a general that we try to work for different areas, because we are diverse And this is what's making us stand today. And we still stand, we need to embrace these differences and think about and look at the solutions, different solutions that are already being made on the communities and on the ground. Thank you.
So another really important point, and I think that idea that things do just come together naturally at the community level and they don't see things in sectors, but they come up with such incredible innovation if given the support. So yeah, I look forward to hearing more about that in Belém. I think we all will. So maybe coming back to the energy sector and what this all means, having heard the other panelists, Simon, how would you see the tripling of renewable energy capacity and the doubling of the energy efficiency outcomes of the UAE consensus? How does that relate to the resilience that we've just been discussing and how we bring those synergies to the front?
Thank you, Claire. Also, it's a bit easier, yes. No, I think, first of all, I can only say that everything you said today, it's something we try to capture in ARENA work, supporting today 169 countries, plus the EU, on how to identify co-benefit between mitigations, so the typical large solution, solar plus battery, wind and so on, with the need of the community. And today we are in a specific regional event where essentially for the LAC region we see let's say a very diverse landscape, both in geographical aspect, because some resources are not the same in depending on you are. You also the Caribbean seas also we may not benefit from the same land or other resources, for example, that other countries have. So first of all, geographical. Second, a lot of socioeconomic disparities. So I think fundamentally to make sure that resilience is in the package that government include in their NDCs or their NAPs, National Adaptation Plan, you need to make the economic case of renewables. And today, ARENA, with the support of the European Commission, is developing renewable energy roadmaps for South America and broader, we started with Central America there. So early on, we also recognized that solutions were piloted. You mentioned pilots from, for example, the recovery of Hurricane Maria, where we saw the emergence of new solutions that people thought before were not working. Today you have islands like the island of Isla de la Vieques in Puerto Rico that just it works. So there is no debate. They reduce their fossil fuel dependency, also increase energy access across different communities. And I think that's excellent example of what locally led or community led project can really bring to the table. Secondly, of course, we need to talk about the investment. The high-level champion mentioned we need more question about investment now, because we see globally. Yesterday we launched the 2024 edition of the World Energy Transition Outlook, 1.5 trillions of investment for renewable, but 720 billion on infrastructure. So we discussed the aspect of when you have a bad year in terms of precipitation, hydropower is a difficult option there. So in the past, for example, in Uruguay, we study with the government how those years affect the overall stability and flexibility of the system. So each country needs specific solution. There is no one size fits all there. For the next one of NDC, I think it's fundamental that we make the plea to bring more efforts, to bring more to the attention of policymakers the benefit of resilience for the overall solution. Critical infrastructure will need to be modernized, and in doing so, you are capturing certain element there. I'm part of the ARENA Innovation Integrity Center, and we recently started a work with El Salvador, which actually, Claire mentioned, geospatial issues, really wanted to match climate vulnerability with the availability of solar, of renewable resources. And by matching those, they aim to increase for the community, specific communities in a very diverse country, in El Salvador, the benefits that renewed infrastructure there. That's a topic in demand as well. We hope very soon with the high-level champions team to co-publish a policymaker publication on the benefit of resilience for the tripling pledge, and also making sure that this is the start of the discussion when you want to talk about infrastructure, because that doesn't match if you have to rebuild your infrastructure every year. In the Caribbean seas, you have around 10% of the GDP that is lost annually due to extreme weather events. So we have solution here. We need consensus on how to accelerate those investments. IDBs represent. There was a lot of positive signal 2 weeks ago in Olade as well, ministerial, that signaled that countries are ready to deliver this pledge together, and there is solutions that are local to Latin America due to the let's say interconnection of Central America, the community aspect, and also let's not forget the indigenous knowledge that also can bring this solution faster and also with more value to the communities.
Excellent. That brings it all together beautifully. I guess there's been a lot of synergies between us all in these discussions as well, and we are in a situation, though, where governments are being endlessly asked to provide a report for this, a report for that. They're going to write this plan, then they're expected to turn it into a financing plan. And then, it's just like endless jumping through the hoops. And actually the work that needs to be done on the ground of breaking down the sectoral silos, looking at things more spatially, is critically the job of the coming years. So, I mean, we're here at Baku, we're heading to Belém. What would you like to see? If we just do a round, we've got a few minutes, I think. If we just do a round of, what would you like to see from coming out of this COP, sending signals to Belém so that we, at the next ambition moment, we really do begin to shift the dynamic, shift the conversation with governments so they're not being asked to jump through so many hoops and can actually get on with that sort of work on the ground, building that locally led vision that we've been touching on. I think my mic's about to go as well, but do you want to start? Should we go round?
Okay,
yeah.
I'll take this out because it's a bit weird. Couple of things. I think I would like to see, of course, what we came here for, which is enhanced trust among the governments around the finance agenda. The finance agenda is important both for mitigation and adaptation, but beyond this, it's also important that governments do have enhanced trust on the multilateralism for us to move ahead next year with a successful COP. In that regard, I think on the particular conversation we're having about resilience infrastructure, how this relates to mitigation, also that we start thinking about what implementation means, and just not have implementation on silos or artificial targets or sometimes artificial agenda items of the convention, and at the national level we can all work together to make those things happen in a logical way. So I think there are a lot of instruments. People are talking about country platforms now to mobilize resources. There are ways to look at how we bring these connections, as we were talking on, looking at ecosystems in a broader way, the linkage between nature and climate. There are different ways we can really start looking at implementation. So I hope we all can start thinking about implementation again, not just having the silos or the specific approaches, and looking at solutions that make sense from the social point of view she was mentioning, as well as from the point of view of, resolving the development challenges we have in a combined manner.
Yeah, excellent. I like that very much. A focus on delivery and a focus on the finance, not just the planning. It's important messages. So Hannah, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say also the financial system, but to see as this road to Belém as really a movement to build. We came right now from the USA elections, and we need to remember that we have this road to go through in Brazil also, because in 2026 we also have elections, and this is a way that we are building from now in COP29. We're receiving COP30 next year in Belém, and how to see that we are increasing the engagement of people through this way and don't forgetting about this engagement in 2026 looking for the elections in Brazil. So that's where we can see how the implementation will go, but how we are going to see the realities on the ground for real. So I want to see this road being built from now to 2026 and so on, not to just 2025.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yes, being robust to elections seems particularly important around the world right now, for sure. Aliti, what do you think?
So I think one important element that we need to see coming out of Baku is the seriousness of adaptation finance coming forward, because even if we are here in the, let's say, the framing of the COP, we can't blur those lines of adaptation and mitigation. Even if this is a process, right, of language, of knowledge, of understanding how we can create those synergies. But for here, we still have a polarization between adaptation and mitigation. But if everything that we are saying, that it's the economic case for a synergetic infrastructure is real, we need to see the signs that people understand that. And the finance for adaptation will be one important sign for that. One thing, it's also another wish, if I could say, that would be great to see is this next level, this next round of NDCs that we're going to see coming out, hopefully in the next 3 months or so. The language, the way they frame this synergy between adaptation and mitigation should be different. And this is about language, but it's also about intentionality of doing so. And this is something that should be north and south. So, because in the end of the day, we are talking about infrastructure everywhere. This is something that we are seeing a bit the appetite for bringing nature as an important element of this second round of NDCs and so on. But this triangle linking the three elements, I hope we're going to see more NDCs with the stronger components of that.
You have my aspiration exactly there. That is exactly what we hope for, to begin to break down these barriers. So last words to you then.
Yes,
no pressure.
No pressure. First of all, I'm a bit worried about the timeline. February, a lot of countries needs to, let's say, prepare. We see countries hiring people to work on NDCs. That doesn't happen in 3 months. My aspiration is that our collective work send a signal that integrating resilience in national plans, in strategies, in policies, will also convince the broader energy ecosystem, power systems, utilities, and so on, that and investors, obviously, that resilience is a national priority. And that's a kind of a chicken and egg. If there is no perception of this is a priority, the money will not come. Okay, that's just that. And sometimes those conservative utilities will fight a bit this, and we need more signal that this become a national priority in the, let's say, fight against climate change. Second one, we need to bring more evidence that renewables combined can, first of all, reduce the vulnerability of underserved areas. Really important. There is evidence that we can bring to the table. Second, obviously, it can provide more an equitable access to energy, will increase also all other services across communities, cities, and so on. Also important, it creates jobs. IRENA, recently we published our job report, 16.2 million in 2023. North of 40 million jobs are in the renewable sector to be taken by countries, also creating new solutions that are community-led. And third, let's use Latin America as an example of cross-country collaboration, of what countries made together in terms of grid interconnection, but also in deployment of cross-border renewable generation. So that can be a powerful message to really move the needle and change the amount of money that is bringing into climate adaptation.
That's excellent. Okay, so we've got some solutions here. I wish these were being written up and sort of fed into the next round of NDCs, because I really do think that between us we've covered a lot of the solutions to challenges that seem to be just keep coming up, and accessing the funding being available is obviously going to drive a lot of confidence in that ambition. But it's also about making every dollar or pound or euro or whatever go as far as possible by really putting it into the hands of those that can see where the synergies are and make sure that we're doing as much as we can with the limited resources we have. I think the idea that the next round of NDCs should be materially different in terms of their language and how we're integrating across these. I hope that's so. I think we're possibly still in the learning phase of these processes, but certainly it feels like the language in these rooms is changing. So maybe that's an indicator that they will. I guess this idea of engaging people in a movement is really resonated with me. I mean, I think I'm definitely an optimist, and I was a bit surprised by the election in the US. I was really thinking that people would vote for climate this time, but they didn't. So how do we engage, across all of our societies? And I think we've got problems across Europe as well as the US. So it's a matter of doing this in every country in every part of the world, of how do we make climate resilient to any election and something that everyone can see that their aspirations, their visions are there. But this conversation has filled me with great hope, so thank you all very much. I feel very like-minded with you all. And thank you all for coming. No. Thanks to all the panelists and all the people in the audience. We will share the results of the... first we will have a photo? In 5 minutes. Okay. So we will share the results of the work that the cartoonist has been doing. And then we will have the words of Marcia Toledo from the Climate Champions team to wrap up.
Super. So if we can hear his...
Hi everyone, I hope I'm audible. These are the cartoons I've come up with during the session. First of all, thank you. It was a very energizing and a session full of spirited speeches, and that really helped my work. Here's the first one. I'll just read out the captions for the sake of convenience. We have a jaguar, an animal that is revered and very familiar in Latin America, saying, I swam all the way from COP Biodiversity, Colombia, to tell COP Climate that these two events are connected. Here's the second one. We go back in time. Then Christopher Columbus has just landed in South America, and he's saying, hooray, we've discovered South America. Greetings from indigenous South Americans. And now, hooray, we are launching climate action in South America. Greetings from indigenous climate leaders. Here's the third one. Latin American deities update their portfolios for the Anthropocene. We have Pachamama, the goddess of harvest, now changed to the goddess of climate resilient agriculture. Inti, the sun god, has now changed to god of renewable energy infrastructure. Quetzalcoatl, the wind god, has now changed to god of climate disaster management. And Tezcatlipoca, the jaguar god of conserving whatever's left of the Amazon. And to end it on a positive note, we have South America looking at herself in the mirror. Are you a reflection of my past self? And the reflection says, I'm a climate resilient future inspired by your past. Thanks, everyone. All these cartoons will be furnished and kept ready for publishing by all of you in your respective publications or newsletters or social media within an hour or so. Thanks, everyone.
Fabulous. Very much thank you for those excellent reflections of the conversation we had. And to wrap up very quickly, very important keywords our panel shared. what are the opportunities to shift the approaches? We have the solutions, we have the actors already implementing those actions and financing those solutions. How can we bring them to scale, improving planning, investing, bringing the whole society approach for the implementation of those solutions, but most importantly, bringing people at the center of the synergetic climate mitigation and adaptation to enhance the resilience of the regions, resilience of the communities, of the different actors that have actually an opportunity. So very, very excited that this actually was an event that we could elevate that synergy. So look forward as well to continue collaborating with many of you from the side of the champions. Thank you very much.